All right, so this is the final video in the series of three, and this one is about using Google, the standard search engine, more effectively. So one of the things that I've tried to impress upon you so far in the course is that we're only as good as the information that we have at our disposal. So it becomes really important for us to do our due diligence and to make sure that we are actively searching for the best content that we can find. And so one of the things that we can do, obviously, is to limit ourselves to academic journals and those types of publications. But another thing that we can do is simply know where to look on the vast World Wide Web for high quality information. And when we use Google, the standard search engine, generally speaking, we're kind of at the mercy of the algorithm that Google uses. And I challenge you to tell me how that algorithm works, because it's so complicated and so sophisticated that it's very hard to put our finger on. But it takes into account many of the things that we don't care about as academics, as researchers, as practitioners. It takes into account things like geographic location, websites that have the most links pointed at them, and a number of things that really have nothing to do, frankly, with the quality of the information. So I'm going to show you some techniques and some tools for getting around that. And they're going to build on some of the things that we've talked about before, and they're going to introduce some totally new concepts. So we're going to use those Boolean operators that we talked about previously, and I'm going to make sure that I post, as soon as I get this up on the Blackboard page, I'm going to post a little handout about Boolean operators that may or may not prove helpful to you. But so we're going to use those, and then we're also going to use the power of Google, but we're going to point it at very particular parts of the web. So I'm going to show you something really quickly here. If we type in heart disease and wine, and even if we use our quotation marks here, let's see what we get for a search. All right, we get 22,400,000 results. And some of them are really, frankly, from good sources. The Mayo Clinic is a relatively good source. Heart.org is a good source. GoRedForWomen.org. I mean, these are good sources, but they're not necessarily academic. They're written for an audience probably of lay people, or people who, general consumers, or people who are kind of interested in heart health and wine. So what we can actually do by using a little tag called site : is we can tell Google where to look. And so we can tell it to look at just particular types of websites, or we can tell it to look at particular websites, and we can get pretty sophisticated with this. So the first thing that we can do is we could probably just limit this to .edu websites, for instance, and it's just going to look at academic websites. So let's see what happens there. We've got 22 million to start. Okay, and that brings it down to 51,600. So of all those search returns that included nonprofit organizations, might even include for-profit organizations, now we've got it really limited down to .edu websites. So a couple of things I'll say about this. One of the things that's really helpful about this is that basically anytime a researcher puts out a major publication or has a major finding, their college or university is going to write a press release about it, or they're going to write a blog post about it, or they're going to write something about it that's really written for a wider audience. And so that's cool, because it's generally written in plain language, and it's written for mass consumption. It's not written in that very technical language. So that's really helpful. So it's going to distill down an academic study or a scientific study in a way that we can digest it. The other thing that's cool about it is that it's, generally speaking, if it's going to take up web space on an academic website, it's going to be pretty carefully vetted. So in other words, Harvard medical school, or the Harvard University in general, is probably not going to host something on their website that they don't have a great deal of confidence in. So looking at .edu websites is a great way to get general information, and sometimes it's a great way to get a sort of Cliffs Notes version of a scientific study. However, I will provide this caveat. At many major universities and large universities, nearly everybody on campus has access to web space. So that means that any Tom, Dick, or Harry can make a website and can post information. And this includes undergraduates, graduates, PhD students, professors, staff members. And so just because it's hosted on a .edu website doesn't mean that it's necessarily that it necessarily meets our high standards. So I would encourage you to take a look at these. You can see that Harvard has a lot of stuff, the University of California, Penn State University, Vanderbilt, Wisconsin, and there's all sorts of stuff. And we could actually even add more. We could say heart disease and wine and caffeic acid if we were so inclined, and I haven't done this yet. but I would imagine this is going to take our search results down from 51,000 to a much, much smaller number. So let's see what happens. And it does. It takes us down to about 1,320. And that's still a lot, but it's a little bit more manageable. And again, we can click on all of these and read them if we're so inclined. And so that's pretty helpful. The other thing that you can do here is you can limit it to, let's say, a .gov website, which is a government-sponsored website. And here we go. And no surprise to me, we're going to start to see stuff from the National Institute of Health. And that's a major sponsor of scientific research and medical research. We're also going to see stuff from Medline Plus, which is a great high-quality resource. We're going to see stuff from the Center for Disease Control, stuff from the Center for Women's Health, all sorts of really high-quality stuff. Again, generally speaking, if it's housed on a government website, there's going to be a high threshold for the information, and there's going to be a pretty high standard. You've maybe been told in the past that .org websites are a good place to look. I'm going to bust that myth right now and tell you that if I wanted to, I could go on GoDaddy.com, and in the next 15 minutes, I could have a website up and running called, winehelpstheheart.org, for instance. And I can post whatever I want on there, and it's not peer-reviewed, it's not scrutinized, and unsuspecting people could potentially take it as gospel. So keep that in mind, that .org websites are not generally hard to create, and anybody can create them. And actually, they can be for-profit. They don't even have to be non-profit anymore. So keep that in mind. So that's one basic way to use it. The other thing that we can do is we can point it at whole websites. So rather than looking at .gov and .edu as these larger bodies of websites, we could, for instance, point it exclusively at the National Institute of Health.gov, and we are only going to get returns from NIH. Okay, and these are all, a lot of these are studies. And so that's really helpful. And again, we can start to layer those terms on, and we can do ancapheic acid, and let's see what happens. We're going to bring it down to about 420 things. And these are all studies. And so now you could click on any of these, and because they are sponsored by the federal government and by the National Institute of Health, they are open access, and so you should have access to the entire article. And I would encourage you to do the same thing here that I've encouraged you to do in other applications, and that is to take a look at the Works Cited page. And again, somebody here that gets paid a lot of money to do this research has already compiled 116 resources, and you can see that there are links here to look at those resources if you are so inclined. And so as you can see, my metaphor of the spider web windshield kind of holds true. You find that one little locust spot and things will quickly tend to spiderweb out. You can also click on the authors if you want to find out more about them, where they work, other things that they've published. PubMed does a really nice job of showing you similar articles, and you can see where they're published and those types of things. Again, take note of where these things are published. This was published in the journal Nutrients. So you may find, for instance, if that's something that you're really interested in, you could click on that. And so just by being a little bit more intelligent about how we use Google, we can really harness its power, and we can find a lot of really powerful things. You can see here that because Google is kind of in conversation with Google Scholar, we can also click the cited by, and it routes us right over there. So these skills do tend to overlap. And so, yeah, so that's one of the ways that we can use Google more effectively. And I can tell you that this saves you a lot of time. It really allows you to separate the wheat from the chaff. And you may find, for instance, that there is a particular organization, professional organization, on whose website you typically find really good information, like the American Association of Nurses or the American Medical Assistant Association, etc. And you may want to find out what their best practices are, or what their perspective on a particular topic is. And you could certainly limit your search to just their website. So you could do the aama.org, and you would only get stuff from the American Association of Medical Assistants. And so sometimes that's very helpful to see what your particular professional organization is saying. So I encourage you to do that too. Play around with this. This is also, even though we're talking about this relative to, pretty academic and pretty professional stuff, I use this all the time in my personal life. When I'm trying to answer a question or solve a problem, and I don't really want somebody to sell me a product necessarily, I just want information. Say I want information on tax law. I'm trying to write something off on my taxes and I want to know if I can do it. Generally speaking, if you type anything in about your income taxes, you are going to get people trying to sell you, tax completion software and those types of things. And those aren't very helpful. But if I can limit my search maybe to irs.gov or some other website that I know is going to provide me high quality information, that can be super helpful. So that's just one of the ways that we can use Google more effectively. I'm going to share a little infographic with you from a website called Mashable that shows you that you can actually layer additional tags onto this. So not only can you tell it to look at a particular type of website, you can also tell it to pull from a particular time frame, and actually you can tell it to pull particular types of files. So I'll make sure to post that in the next 24 hours or so, and if you're so inclined, you can take a look at that and build your knowledge. But I promise you that by using this tool alone, you'll instantly be able to find stuff more effectively on the interwebs. So thank you for sitting through what is probably now about 35 minutes of videos, but I know for a fact that they will help you not only in this class, not only in the nursing program, but also in your personal/professional life. I can't tell you enough how important it is to be able to find quality information, not only in an academic environment, but a professional environment. You'd be surprised how coveted that is as a job skill, as a work skill, to be able to get your hands on information about best practices or just factual information. Maybe you just need to know about a particular drug interaction, for instance. Just by being able to look it up effectively, you can save you and your employer time and money. Anyway, I've rambled enough. If you have any questions about this, don't hesitate to call, text, or email. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing what you choose for topics, and I look forward to helping you learn more about those topics as the semester unfolds. Take care, and I will talk to you soon.